Elvis was driving to Graceland when his phone rang with news that made him slam on the brakes and turn around immediately. His 14-year-old cousin Billy Smith had been suspended from school, not for bad behavior, not for poor grades, but because the principal said he was too poor to maintain proper educational standards. What Elvis did in the next 48 hours didn't just get Billy back in school. It destroyed a corrupt educator's career and revolutionized how American schools treat students from low-income families. It was September 15, 1965, and Elvis had just finished a recording session in Nashville when he received an urgent call from his aunt Gladys Smith. She was crying so hard that Elvis could barely understand what she was saying. "They threw Billy out of school, Elvis," she sobbed. "The principal said he doesn't belong there anymore, said he's bringing down the school's reputation." Billy Smith was Elvis's first cousin and one of his closest family members. At 14, Billy was a bright, hard-working kid who had been looking forward to starting his freshman year at East Memphis High School, one of the better public schools in the area. But Billy's family was struggling financially. His father, Elvis's uncle Travis Smith, worked as a part-time mechanic when he could find work. His mother took in sewing when possible. The family lived in a small rental house and scraped by on whatever income they could manage. For Billy, school represented hope, a chance to get an education that might lead to better opportunities than his parents had ever had. He was determined to succeed despite his family's financial limitations. Elvis immediately drove to his aunt's house to find out exactly what had happened. What he learned made his blood boil. The trouble had started on Billy's third day at East Memphis High. Billy had been wearing the same jeans for several days, the only decent pants he owned. His notebooks were second-hand, his pencils worn down, and his shoes had holes patched with cardboard. None of this affected Billy's ability to learn. He was attentive in class, completed assignments, and got along well with other students. But it caught Principal Robert Caldwell's attention. Principal Caldwell was a 48-year-old educator who had built his career on maintaining high standards at East Memphis High. The school served middle-class and wealthy families, and Caldwell prided himself on the institution's reputation. Caldwell had called Billy to his office that morning. "Son," Caldwell had said, looking at Billy's worn clothes and patched shoes, "I think there's been a mistake in your enrollment." "No, sir," Billy replied. "I live in the district. I'm supposed to be here." Caldwell walked around his desk and looked Billy up and down like he was inspecting defective merchandise. "Billy, East Memphis High has certain standards. Our students come from quality families who understand the importance of proper presentation and adequate preparation. Look at yourself. You're wearing the same clothes you wore yesterday and the day before." Billy's face turned red with embarrassment. "Yes, sir, but I'm here to learn." "My clothes don't affect my brain." "That's where you're wrong," Caldwell said coldly. A student's appearance reflects their family's values and priorities. When parents can't provide proper clothing and supplies for their children, it sends a message that education isn't truly important to them. Billy tried to defend his family. "My parents care about my education more than anything. They want me to succeed." If that were true, they would ensure you came to school properly equipped and appropriately dressed. The fact that you don't suggest this school might not be the right fit for your situation. Caldwell returned to his desk and pulled out a form. "I'm suspending you pending a conference with your parents about whether East Memphis High can adequately serve your educational needs." Billy stared at the suspension notice in disbelief. "You're kicking me out because my family doesn't have money?" "I'm suggesting that you might be more comfortable at a school that better matches your background and circumstances," Caldwell replied. "There are other schools in the district that cater to students from different economic situations." Billy understood exactly what Caldwell meant. He was being told that poor kids didn't belong at the good school. When Billy came home with the suspension notice, his parents were devastated. They had sacrificed everything to move into the East Memphis High District because they wanted their son to have the best education possible. Now they were being told that their sacrifice wasn't enough, that their poverty made their son unwelcome. That's when Elvis's aunt called him for help. After hearing the full story, Elvis was furious. This wasn't just about Billy. It was about a system that judged children based on their parents' income rather than their potential. Aunt Gladys, Elvis said, Billy is going back to that school tomorrow, and Principal Caldwell is going to learn what happens when he mistakes kindness for weakness. The next morning, Elvis drove Billy to school personally. He walked into East Memphis High wearing a simple black shirt and jeans, but his presence immediately attracted attention from students and staff. Word spread quickly that Elvis Presley was in the building. Elvis went straight to Principal Caldwell's office. Mr. Caldwell, I'm Elvis Presley, Billy Smith's cousin. I understand you have some concerns about my family member's enrollment. Caldwell's demeanor immediately changed when he saw Elvis. He became overly friendly, clearly hoping to impress the famous musician. Mr. Presley, what an honor. I had no idea Billy was related to you. Please come in, sit down. Can I get you coffee? Elvis remained standing. I'm here to discuss why you suspended my cousin. Caldwell's smile became nervous. Well, it was really just a misunderstanding. You see, we have certain standards here, and sometimes there are adjustments that need to be made. What kind of adjustments? Well, Billy's presentation didn't quite meet our usual expectations. But now that I know he's your family, I'm sure we can work something out. Elvis stared at Caldwell with disgust. So you're saying Billy is suddenly acceptable because he's related to someone famous? That's not exactly what I meant. That's exactly what you meant, Elvis interrupted. Yesterday, Billy was too poor for your school. Today, because he's my cousin, he's good enough. What's changed about Billy? Caldwell shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Presley, you have to understand, East Memphis High has a reputation to maintain. Parents expect their children to be surrounded by appropriate influences. Appropriate influences like a hard-working kid who wants to learn despite having less money than his classmates? It's not about money, Caldwell protested. It's about standards, about maintaining an environment that supports excellence. Elvis had heard enough. Mr. Caldwell, let me tell you about standards. Billy's parents work multiple jobs to pay rent in this district so their son can get a good education. Billy walks to school every day because his family can't afford a car, but he's never missed a day. Billy does his homework by candlelight when the electricity gets shut off, but he still turns it in on time. Caldwell's face was turning red. Mr. Presley, I appreciate your loyalty to your family, but what? But poor kids don't deserve the same education as rich kids? Elvis looked around Caldwell's office, noting the expensive furniture and framed certificates. Mr. Caldwell, how much does this school receive in state funding per student? Caldwell consulted a file. Approximately $1,200 per student per year. So Billy's education is worth $1,200 to the state of Tennessee, same as every other kid in this school. But you've decided he's not worth educating here because his shoes have holes in them. The confrontation continued for another hour. Elvis made it clear that Billy would be returning to classes immediately, and that any further discrimination would result in consequences Caldwell couldn't imagine. You've got one chance to do the right thing, Elvis told the principal. Treat my cousin like every other student in this school. Judge him by his effort, his character, and his academic performance. Nothing else matters. Billy returned to classes that afternoon, but Elvis wasn't satisfied with just solving one case. He began investigating how many other students had been pushed out of East Memphis High for similar reasons. What he discovered was systematic discrimination. Over the past 3 years, Caldwell had counseled out over 200 students from low-income families, suggesting they would be more comfortable at other schools. He had created an informal but effective economic segregation system that kept East Memphis High's demographics artificially wealthy. Elvis documented these practices and took them to the Memphis School Board, the Tennessee Department of Education, and the local press. The investigation that followed was devastating for Caldwell. Educational authorities found that his policies violated both state education laws and federal civil rights protections. He had systematically denied educational opportunities to students based solely on their economic status. The Memphis Commercial Appeal ran a front-page story. High school principal accused of economic discrimination. The article detailed Caldwell's practices and included interviews with families who had been pushed out of East Memphis High. The public response was immediate and angry. Parents throughout Memphis began questioning whether their own children's schools were engaging in similar discrimination. The The school board received hundreds of calls demanding investigation and reform. Caldwell tried to defend his actions in a disastrous press conference. East Memphis High has always maintained high standards, he told reporters. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions about student placement. When reporters pressed him about specific cases, Caldwell's answers revealed the depth of his class prejudice. Some families simply don't prioritize education the way others do, he said. When children come to school unprepared, it disrupts the learning environment for everyone. The press conference only made things worse. Parents, teachers, and education advocates were outraged by Caldwell's attitude toward low-income students. Within a week, a group of parents had organized a boycott of East Memphis High. Enrollment dropped by 30% as families transferred their children to other schools in protest of Caldwell's leadership. The school board had no choice but to act. In October 1965, Principal Robert Caldwell was fired and banned from working in Tennessee public education. The school board also implemented new policies prohibiting discrimination based on economic status and requiring all schools to provide support services for low-income students. Elvis's involvement had exposed a problem that existed far beyond one school. His advocacy led to state legislation requiring Tennessee schools to provide free supplies and clothing assistance for students who needed them. The Billy Smith Education Act, passed in 1966, established that no student could be denied educational opportunities because of their family's economic circumstances. Billy Smith thrived at East Memphis High after Caldwell's removal. With the pressure of economic discrimination removed, Billy focused on his studies. He graduated in 1969 as valedictorian and received a full scholarship to the University of Tennessee. He became an electrical engineer, designed systems for NASA, and in 1995 established the Billy Smith Scholarship Fund for low-income students. Elvis taught me that success isn't about where you come from, Billy said. It's about where you're determined to go. He made sure I had the chance to prove that poor kids can achieve anything if given the opportunity. The new principal, Dr. Margaret Coleman, transformed the school's culture with programs supporting students from all economic backgrounds. The changes contributed to broader transformation in Tennessee education, with schools adopting policies ensuring economic status never became a barrier to learning. Robert Caldwell never worked in education again. He left Memphis in 1966 and sold insurance in rural Tennessee. In a 1985 interview, he said, "I believed I was doing what was best for the school, but I realize now that I was wrong to judge students by their circumstances rather than their potential." Today, East Memphis High School has a memorial garden dedicated to students who overcame economic challenges. A plaque reads, "In honor of Billy Smith and all students who proved that determination matters more than bank accounts." The story of Elvis, Billy Smith, and Principal Caldwell reminds us that education is a fundamental right, not a privilege reserved for the wealthy. Elvis could have simply used his influence to get Billy readmitted and ignored the broader problem. Instead, he chose to confront a system denying opportunities to hundreds of children based solely on their family's economic circumstances. In doing so, he helped create an educational system where a student's potential matters more than their parents' paycheck, where determination is valued more than designer clothes, and where every child gets the chance to prove what they can achieve when given a fair opportunity. Sometimes the most important lessons are taught not in classrooms, but in principals' offices where adults decide whether children's dreams are worth pursuing regardless of their family's bank accounts. If this incredible story of educational justice moved you, make sure to subscribe for more amazing true stories about fighting for equal opportunities. Share this with someone who works in education or who needs to hear about the power of standing up for kids who can't advocate for themselves. Have you ever seen someone overcome economic challenges to achieve educational success? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for more inspiring stories about ensuring every child gets a fair chance to learn.